and welcome to my home. Come in. Tonight I have the distinct pleasure of hosting a small dinner party for a group of unbelievably brilliant people. Thought I'd give you a pre-party tour. The guest list includes Einstein, Freud, Stravinsky, Eliot, Picasso, Martha Graham, and Gandhi. I know what you're thinking. How on earth am I going to carry on a dinner conversation with this lot? Don't worry, I've done some prelim work. In fact, I've outlined some highlights of each person on their dinner napkin. I won't read you all of the information, but we'll go through some highlights. The first guest, Sigmund Freud. Freud was born in Austria. He was Jewish, and he was the first of 7 children. His academic strengths allowed him certain privileges. He was quite the smarty pants, in fact, fluent in 6 languages, and a broad spectrum of interest in science, medicine, religion, art, and of course, psychology. He was close to his parents and had a doting nurse. He married and had 6 children. Overall, he can be described as lively, enthusiastic, witty, curious, ambitious, egotistical, and quite the politician. Moving around the table, our next guest is Mr. Albert Einstein. Einstein was born in Germany. He was Jewish, but had little interest in organized religion. He was close to his sister and was allowed as a child to be curious and ask some tough questions. He was not happy with mainstream science courses and had a preference instead for hands-on education, and of course, an unhealthy obsession with physics. He married twice and had 3 children, many affairs, and some good friends. Overall, he can be described as ambitious, daring, independent, arrogant at times, but generally a likable fellow. Sitting beside Albert Einstein is Pablo Picasso. Picasso was born in Spain. He was a Catholic. He had a good relationship with his father, not so much with Mom's. He needed help to get through school successfully and had an affinity for drawing early on. He did have trouble with numbers, viewing them as visual patterns instead of symbols. His uncle Salvador paid for his schooling at the Academy of Fine Arts. He married twice and had 3 children, and again, many mistresses. Able to collaborate despite his ego, that led to Cubism. From a personality standpoint, he's charismatic, superstitious, selfish, dedicated, again egotistical, and his relationships did affect his art. Our next guest is Igor Stravinsky. Stravinsky was born in Russia. He was a member of the Russian Orthodox Church, the 3rd of 4 sons in his family, and he was of landed gentry on both sides. He lived in Switzerland, France, and the U.S. He had a reasonable relationship with his parents. He loved his governess, but he was a lonely child. He had a preference for self-education. He liked setting and solving his own problems. He was married twice and had 4 children. And from a personality standpoint, he's described as having a dark one. Controversial, cerebral, hardworking, definitely a private person, legalistic, and somewhat ungenerous, especially with his family. Moving to the opposite end of the dinner table, we have T.S. Eliot. As you all know, Eliot was an American. He's Anglo-Catholic. He grew up in Boston to an affluent family. His father was a successful businessman and his mother was a great poet. He followed his family's wishes initially by attending Harvard, and he had a beloved Irish nurse. He married unhappily to his first wife, and later with satisfaction to a second, and had no children. His personality can be described as bookish, reclusive, witty, thoughtful, somewhat shy. He did have a delicate sense of humor, and he was gracious. Our next guest is Martha Graham. Martha was also an American. She grew up a strict Presbyterian. She had a secure family life, and had lost her father at the age of 20 to a heart attack. She did well in school, had a liberal arts education, and developed quite the passion for dance. She was a quick learner and pushed herself tremendously. She had a 20-year affair with a married man, followed by a brief marriage, and had no children. She did collaborate with an actress and a poet well, but not so much with other dancers. She can be described as driven, a perfectionist, and even as cruel, vicious, and vindictive when she wanted to get her way. And next to Martha, we have Mahatma Gandhi, from India. He was Hindu. Although not highly educated or wealthy, he did do well. His parents were open to a range of religious practices and beliefs, despite being Hindu. He had a notable interest in right and wrong from a very early age and became the family peacemaker. He did marry at the age of 13 and had 4 children, although he was not close to any of them. He's described as being brilliant at reaching millions, but had trouble with more intimate relationships, including those of his family. He had high morals, stood for nonviolence, exemplified self-control, and liked to call the shots and make major decisions. Unable to grasp that some people were immoral and amoral, he did eventually become disillusioned with constitutional politics. Note to self, that's quite a lengthy list of people and accomplishments. We will avoid the topics of religion and politics with this crowd. To wrap up this pre-party tour, I've outlined a few similarities and differences I have with my guests on a napkin of my own. Now, I won't read all of this information to you verbatim, but we'll give you some highlights. Our differences obviously speak for themselves. I'm not a psychoanalyst, scientist, painter, composer, writer, dancer, or even a political figure, to be sure. And since you can't find me in an encyclopedia or even via Google, I'd say I'm relatively less well known, and for good reason. But surprisingly, we do have some things in common. From a high level, we're all human beings with personal aspirations. We were born to mortal parents. We are on the earth for a short period of time, and we must all relate to the people around us. The manner in which we do so is yet another difference. To dive a little deeper and share some specific detail, from a similarity standpoint, I can say I experienced encouragement from my mother, like Freud. I do like to challenge convention, like Einstein, although on a more moderate scale. I lacked an affinity for a specific school subject, namely geometry, as Picasso did with numbers. I am organized and a bit of a perfectionist, both personally and professionally, like Graham and Stravinsky. I do seek feedback from valued sources when the product is meaningful to me, like Eliot with Ezra Pound. I have some level of disillusionment with politics and an inability to accept that some people are just immoral, similar to Gandhi. And one final commonality we all share is the need to seek sustenance, thus the dinner party. Don't worry, I checked and Gandhi isn't fasting today, so we should be safe. I've also secured an assortment of foods for those vegetarians that will be at the table. Having highlighted my findings on each guest, I'm sure we won't be at a loss for words for the dinner. Thank you for allowing me to share my research and insight on my guests. I think we can all conclude with the fact that, like these creative geniuses, working hard, leveraging our resources appropriately, pursuing our passions, and challenging the status quo, and in general being curious about life, can lead to success. Thanks.